Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to Epic Wednesdays. This is a world's finest collaboration between Michael K. Vaughan and myself, where we talk for now, we're talking about his vast collection of Marvel Epic collections. Big, thick, full-color paperback reprint volumes of Marvel's vast back catalog. And I say for now because Michael reminds me that he and I have agreed that Epic Wednesdays, world's finest Epic Wednesdays, can certainly continue away from Marvel Comics, the home of all of the superheroes in therapy, the Fantastic Four and the Avengers and the X-Men and whatnot, that we could go to, for instance, DC Comics, the home of all of the real heroes, Superman and Batman and Wonder Woman and my beloved Legion of Superheroes. Wouldn't that be fun? we will eventually cover all of that ground. But for now, we're dealing with Epic collections. There are a lot of Epic collections to go. We could easily do this for years. And the one that I'm letting Michael choose, of course, since he has the huge collection of these things. The one that we're doing for today is the 7th Epic collection of the Fantastic Four, when Behemoths, the Battle of the Behemoths. And the reason I say 7th is because these things just pop all around the continuity. This is the 7th, this is volume 7 of Fantastic Four Epic collections, but it isn't necessarily the 7th volume of the Fantastic Four to appear in the Epic collection line. The Epic collection is not anchored by chronology. It's not marching forward issue by issue like the Marvel Masterworks series. Instead, it bounces all around. And here it gives us, does it tell me the issues 1970 to 1972? This is Fantastic Four 105 to 125. And that was a settling in period for the Fantastic Four that was created by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby with Fantastic Four #1 that kicked off the Marvel age of comic books. And Stan Lee wrote these things and Jack Kirby drew them for 100 issues. And then that collaboration started to peter out. Both ends of it did. And since no comic company had ever really done that before, right? Creative teams, writers and artists had swapped out on comics forever and ever, since the 1930s. But not a known creative team. One of the elements of Stan Lee's era of Marvel Comics was that the readers began to know the creators. Stan Lee wanted it that way. He talked about the Marvel bullpen. And he characterized his collaborators. He characterized himself, first and foremost, that great sunglasses wearing impresario at the heart of Marvel Comics. But he also characterized other people, too. If you had gone 20 years before Fantastic Four #1 and talked to a comic book fan at the time, of course there's no one here who would have been one at the time. If you'd said, do you like the artwork on Justice League? That comic book fan would have said, yeah, of course I do. What's not to like? And if you'd said, oh, really? So you like so-and-so's art? You like Mike Sekowsky's art? That fan would have said, who's that? It never occurred to them. Fans would have preferences. The famous example in DC Comics from a million years ago was Batman in Batman Comics and Batman in Detective Comics, where every other issue, every 3 issues, the good Batman artist would have an issue, and fans used to know that. But they didn't know that artist's name. They certainly didn't have any idea who was writing these things. Stan Lee introduced that and wrote it for all that it was worth, as a comic book company where fans could get to know the creators and write letters in, talking about how this particular creator was pretty good here, but not so good there. That's a great formula, but since it was unprecedented, Stan Lee and his collaborators had no idea how to deal with changes when that happens. I think when Stan Lee was writing these things in their heyday, 3 years after Fantastic Four #1, I think in the heyday of all of these things, Fantastic Four and Doctor Strange and Spider-Man and the Avengers and all the Hulk and whatnot, I think when he was writing these things, he was kind of thinking this will go on forever. And it didn't. These things still had, 85,000 sales every month. But people don't last forever. Stan Lee didn't want to keep writing these things. Jack Kirby very much did not want to keep drawing these things month after month after month. And if you've created an environment in which the fans know the creators, any change is going to be weird. And Stan Lee was very, very adaptable, very forward-thinking in most ways, but he had no idea how to handle that, none whatsoever. And so, long before he was comfortable with the appearance of an issue of Thor or the Avengers or the Fantastic Four that said written by someone other than Stan Lee, long before he was comfortable seeing that, acknowledging that, he was no longer writing these things. And of course, you don't get that option if you're an artist because your work is visible. But long before Jack Kirby left his signature books, most especially the Fantastic Four, but also Thor, his artwork deteriorated. and Michael K. Vaughan, in his video about this volume, asked that question directly. It's the first time he's ever asked me a direct question in one of our exchanges. Did I know that Kirby was leaving? There was no comic book news. There was no internet. There were no industry magazines at the time. Did I know that Kirby was leaving? I did not. I had no idea that he was leaving, but I knew that he was losing interest in his art because it was just bad. It was getting bad. I was experiencing it with Thor as well. Kirby's final issues on Thor are downright embarrassing. And I would argue, despite what Michael K. Vaughan might say, he's a bit of a true believer. Enough said. I would argue that Kirby's final appearances on the Fantastic Four, the last few panels of which, not a whole issue, but the last few panels of which are actually in this volume, I would argue that they are disastrously bad. Kirby makes up a little bit of Fantastic Four and Thor credit, because years and years later, he came back to Marvel and drew some covers. Marvel disastrously gave him the writing and art chores on Captain America and Black Panther, made both of them into laughingstocks. But in addition to that, Marvel also squeezed a lot of great covers out of Kirby in those years. So there's a period, if you're looking at Marvel, where you get every cover drawn by Jack Kirby, then you get none because he was gone. And then he comes back to the company and you suddenly see new Jack Kirby covers on Thor or the Fantastic Four or whatnot that are some of them really good. This is not a Jack Kirby cover. Because the reason I bring this up is because it was a little awkward. That transition period on these comics is a little awkward. Suddenly, the idea that new people could be writing and drawing these classic comics that fans had known under one creative team for their whole run, practically their whole run, suddenly that idea was present, and fans just had to deal with it. Fans just had to find ways to deal with it. And these issues, that lead up is going to lead you to think that I'm going to say that these issues were not written by Stan Lee. His name is on all of them, although there are frequent mentions of Archie Goodwin pitching in. There are a couple of mentions explicitly that Roy Thomas, who's not in the credits, was sick or out of town and couldn't handle this issue, which made a whole bunch of fans write in at the time and say, what do you mean he can't handle this issue? He's not on the credits. He's not on the masthead. What would there be for him to handle? Was he actually writing this? And if so, for how long? And speculation, I'm sure that comic insiders will have their own opinions on this subject. And that speculation will be that when the artwork switched over, when Kirby was finally mostly gone, the artwork switched over at first to John Romita Sr., just because he's not going to let you down. If you haven't done enough preparation for who's going to take over the creative team of this book, and you still need to put out an issue that month, then you get John Romita Sr. He's not going to let you down, especially if you give him a great inker. Joe Sinnott does the inking for John Romita Sr. in the two or three issues here that he draws. And Sinnott on Romita is amazingly good. Just look at that. Look at how crisp and beautiful that is. Just amazing. Just panel after panel. There's the John Romita Sr. signature thumbs. These are just beautiful. Just beautifully done. And they wouldn't be as beautifully done, I think, if you hadn't got an inker that fits so well with Romita. Romita was a very clean artist. And Sinnott cleans up his artists. So if you put him on an artist who's already clean, you get masterworks. Just masterworks. Fans have speculated that once Romita took over the artwork, and then Romita takes over the artwork, Jack Kirby comes in for a few panels, a half a page here and there. Then John Buscema comes in and does the art for the rest of this run. And speculation has always been that when the artist changed, the writer had already changed as well. It was already Roy Thomas. And that Stan Lee didn't write any of these issues. And I beg to differ. I'm not sure that we'll ever know, but I beg to differ. I think that every issue in this entire run was written by Stan Lee, and I have a reason for that, and the reason for that is heretical. It's at this point in every video that I always wonder, how long is Michael K. Vaughan going to go on in this week's video of mine before he once again thinks, why did I agree to this? But nevertheless, my theory as to why these issues were written by Stan Lee is because of how bad they are. Stan Lee is great. I am a huge Stan Lee fan. But what fans of Stan Lee tend to forget, because of how many great ideas he had, because of how revolutionary his vision of a comic book, a shared superhero universe was, fans who love that, and I love that, tend to forget that the only way you can have that many great ideas is if you have 10 times as many really bad ideas. Stan Lee had, oh my, a huge share of them. He was a derivative writer. He was a repetitive writer. He had a great talent for bathos. The part of you, of deep inside, that is a Hamlet-esque 8-year-old, an overdramatic, melodramatic 8-year-old. You women who are watching are going to say, what do you mean? There's no part of you that's still an 8-year-old. The reason that you think that is because you're not a man. Men will all be naughty. Yes, there is a melodramatic 8-year-old buried inside every man. And Stan Lee had the ability to write to that 8-year-old, directly to that 8-year-old. It's that 8-year-old that is that 8-year-old lives in me, and he is squealing with delight when he rereads this epic collection. Squealing with delight. Even though this epic collection was, when these issues first came out, the cost of this epic collection was my take-home pay for the week. So, even so, the 8-year-old in me is squealing just at the cover. The Thing versus the Hulk. How amazing. It has such an elemental resonance, even though Stan Lee himself put the question to bed long before this cover appeared, when he said that the Thing cannot beat the Hulk. A line that I think it was Roy Thomas, or maybe Marv Wolfman, was going to make explicit about 10 years after this issue came out. Against the Hulk, the Thing cannot win. Nevertheless, you put Thing versus the Hulk in an issue, you're going to have fans coming out of the woodwork to read it. It's all, I think, partly because the Thing doesn't have a chance, but they are so similar as Marvel creations. Stan Lee said a decade before this issue came out, Stan Lee said, if somebody dropped an atom bomb on the Thing, it would probably kill him. Whereas if somebody dropped an atom bomb on the Hulk, he'd pick it up and throw it back. Meaning there's no contest between the two of them. Even so. And this is also a rarity. This is John Buscema is a fantastic comic book artist. He is just incredible. I think Michael picked this book and the last one together to sort of highlight Buscema, highlight how great he is. But boy, oh boy, he had almost no talent as a cover artist. Cover art is completely different from sequential art on the inside. It's got to be one glimpse and you're done. And it's got to work. It's got to have a direct visual power. And Buscema usually stinks at it. This is a rare example of a great Buscema cover. Great Buscema covers tend to be confrontations. For instance, think of the cover of Silver Surfer #4, with the Silver Surfer dive bombing Thor on the Rainbow Bridge of Asgard. That is a Buscema cover. That is also great. But usually not. And we're going to see a couple of examples of what I'm talking about. One in particular that has to be one of the worst Fantastic Four covers ever done by any artist. These issues, the issues that are connected here, are mainly characterized by the bad ideas that run throughout them. How many non-starters are in here? In the issues that are collected here, how many issues are collected? About 20. In the issues that are collected here, let's say 20 issues, there are many multi-issue runs, and most of those multi-issue runs introduce new villains. And they all flop. They all flop. The first one is the Nega Man. Do you Marvel fans know anything about the Nega Man? No, you don't know anything about the Nega Man. And yet he gets a build-up for issues and issues and issues, including a classic issue. Let me see if I can get you the great splash page. An issue that I just loved when it came out. Oh, I bought it on the newsstand and just loved it. The title is 1 from 4 leaves 3. And you have the classic image of Reed Richards stranded in the negative zone, just sitting despondently on a rock. 1 from 4 leaves 3 is incredible. Just amazing. These things were, you can see, they were 15 cents on the newsstand. And I have all of these issues in a box here. Some in worse shape than others. My copy of this issue is not in good shape at all because I reread it all the time. But the Nega Man is the first of those character arcs in here that coincides with an experiment of Reed Richards in which he tries to cure his old friend the Thing. Benjamin Grimm was turned into an orange-scaled monster in the cosmic ray accident that gives the Fantastic Four their powers. And although he appeared in those early issues periodically transforms back into the human Ben Grimm, he always transforms back into the Thing. And Reed Richards has dedicated himself to fixing his friend. And he comes up with an experiment in the early issues here that goes awry. It appears to give Ben Grimm the ability to transform himself backward and forth from the Thing to Ben Grimm at will, but it has affected his mind. It has made him go insane. This is not the only time in this collection that a Fantastic Four member will go insane. They spend most of their time going insane in this issue, except for Sue Richards. Sue Richards is the rock in these issues. But the issue starts off in the very beginning. Beautiful John Romita artwork. I really cannot stress that enough, how lovely it is. It starts off with Crystal of the Inhumans fainting, dead away on a New York street. She was a member of the Fantastic Four for a long time. Fans cheered. She was immensely powerful, a super powerful being from an alternate branch of humanity that had been genetically engineered by the Kree thousands of years ago. It was wonderful, and she faints, dead away on a New York street, and the Human Torch goes nuts. He's in love with her, so he wants to find out what's going on. Reed Richards takes some blood, and does some examinations, and figures out the reason why she passed out on a New York street. It's because growing up in the purified air of Atalan, the hidden secret city of the Inhumans, she has no natural defenses against pollution, against New York City's smog. Never mind the fact that her sister, Medusa, also of the Inhumans, was perfectly able to hang out forever in the normal human world without passing out. And also, wouldn't Reed Richards have already known that about Crystal? Wouldn't you need to take a medical exam in order to be part of the Fantastic Four? It's just silly. It's Stan Lee wanting to get Crystal out of the picture so that he can bring Sue Richards back into the picture. Crystal originally came onto the team to sub for Sue Richards while she was having a baby. The baby is now Franklin Richards. He's not get quite the spotlight that he will get in later issues here. He's just a present figure throughout, as is his nanny. Another example of what I was talking about for the fact that this is certainly Stan Lee who's writing this. His nanny is Agatha Harkness. Now, those of you who don't know these back issues of the Fantastic Four, but do watch the Marvel Cinematic Universe, will know Agatha Harkness as the big reveal villain at the end of WandaVision. There's no comparison. There's no connection between that Agatha Harkness and this one. This Agatha Harkness is an old woman who lives in a shadowy house with a black cat and who turns out is a witch. She's a sorceress. And at first, she does some paltry things, and she is an extremely trusted nanny for Franklin Richards because she has superpowers, basically. As these issues goes on, she gets more and more powerful, to finally, at one point, she can send an astral projection of herself across the universe in order to find the Watcher. Do we have there's a great big beautiful panel where John Buscema draws the Watcher. Yes, there we go. Boom. Agatha Harkness is able to find him when he's at home somewhere. This is before he lived on the moon. At another point, later on in this collection, she is able to relatively effortlessly, she doesn't even need accoutrements. Usually in these issues we're seeing her draw pentagrams on the floor or use orbs or magical items, and it takes a lot out of her. But at the end of the runs collected here, she's able to telepathically connect Reed Richards with every single human being on Earth in their own languages, simultaneously without batting an eye. She doesn't even seem to have any trouble doing it. Another reason why I would think that these issues were written by Stan Lee. But the Nega Man is a bad idea. He's a non-starter. And, of course, this collection ends with one of Stan Lee's most famous non-starters, where the Fantastic Four goes up against the creature from the Black Lagoon. That isn't what they actually call the thing, but Close enough. He abducts Sue Richards, and there's a lot of misunderstanding, and eventually the creature turns out to be noble. But it doesn't go anywhere, and aside from one storyline that I can think of decades later, no one bothers with it. It's a total non-starter. But the biggest example of that, the biggest example of a Stan Lee bad idea, is the center point of this whole collection, the Overmind. We're told the Watcher appears to the Fantastic Four specifically in order to warn them, beware the Overmind. Agatha Darkness, with her mystical abilities, detects the coming of the Overmind. It's foreshadowed for issues. And then the Overmind finally appears, and he is a big doofus, I guess would be the polite way to put it. He's a big doofus. Let me see if I can get you a good picture of him. He's a classic John Buscema doofus. And the reason I say that is because John Buscema, both in the Fantastic Four and in his great run on the Silver Surfer, had a tendency to make himself the villain, to put himself in the position of being the villain. Let me see if I can get you a good image of the Overmind. Yeah, see, there is the sequence where Agatha Harkness ends up in the Watcher's home. Are you the Watcher? Who do you think he is? Where she gets that kind of power, no idea. No idea at all. Yes, here we go. There is the Overmind. Wearing classic 70s garb, but this is his villain armor. He is basically an artist insert for John Buscema. I don't know if that was at Stan Lee's insistence or what. But the Overmind is teased for many issues. Then he fights the Fantastic Four for many issues. And finally, the Watcher is called upon to give his origin story. And it's big and it's grand. It occasions some fantastic John Buscema artwork. Just fantastic. Look at this fantasy stuff. The perfect Buscema combination of fantasy and science fiction. Panel after panel of it. Just gorgeous. Just gorgeous. Like we saw in that Thor volume with the Eternity Saga. Very much the same period. Just a classic example of the inker getting out of Buscema's way and just letting him do this amazing stuff. We get the Overmind's origin story, and the Fantastic Four fight him. He takes control of Reed Richards. This is another character who goes insane. And the Fantastic Four still has to fight him. Sue Richards is out of ideas. Once again, no superheroes seem to be in town. She's out of ideas. She's thought of all of these people. What good Daredevil would do against the Overmind, I have no idea. She's thought of all these people, but I guess she got the answer machine for all of them. Except for one. There's one character she hasn't thought of. Who may be able to help her. The Watcher actually gives her the idea. Or is it Agatha Harkness? One or the other. They act like Deus Ex Machina all the time. But the idea is absolutely inspired, and it is pure Stan Lee. And that is Dr. Doom. And so in this issue, Dr. Doom fights alongside the Fantastic Four to help overcome the Overmind. And they eventually do. They use a combination of pluck and courage and physical power and a scientific invention that Dr. Doom cobbles together in no time at all to overcome and defeat the Overmind. There's almost nothing in the way of lasting ramifications. Doom says he's bitter at the end. He helped them to fight the Overmind because he didn't want to face the thing on his own. But he's not a good guy. There's no rapprochement between him and the Fantastic Four. Reed Richards overcomes the mental domination of the Overmind, but it's a dud of a story. The only interesting element about the Overmind is pretty darn interesting. It's pretty darn interesting. Let me see if I can get you to the right page. The Overmind, it turns out, is from a race of superpowered immortal beings. They have vast energy powers. They don't age. They live separate from humanity, but have engaged with humanity many, many times. And occasionally they can group together and meld their minds into one being. That is what the Overmind is. And you might be thinking, that sounds a little familiar. When Jack Kirby left Marvel Comics and went to DC Comics, he created something. Didn't he create something like that? No. It was when he came back to Marvel Comics. he was given free rein. He was told, I am a writer. I'm an auteur. I'm not just an artist. I'm a writer as well. And he created something called the Eternals. You might know that name because it's about to be the newest addition to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Jack Kirby created a race of superpowered beings who occasionally interfere with humanity. They have vast strength, vast energy powers. And occasionally they bond together into something called, not the Overmind, but the Unimind. Is it possible that Jack Kirby was simply ripping off a dud of a story from Stan Lee? Is it possible? Oh, you might be saying, oh, come on, Kirby wouldn't do that. It's got to be a coincidence. He might have been vaguely remembering a few details from those early Overmind issues of the Fantastic Four, but you can't say that he was straight up ripping that off for his Eternals comic book. Oh. The alien race is called the Eternals. Well, it's when I bought Eternals #1 with its Jack Kirby cover, the Adventures of Icarus, all these characters that are going to appear in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. When I bought the Eternals #1, I immediately remembered the Overmind issues of the Fantastic Four, and I have chuckled secretly over them quite a few times in subsequent decades when Marvel fanboys who don't know anything at all, who weren't born when these issues were coming out, would just routinely say on internet chat boards or in comments fields or whatever that Stan Lee didn't write any of this stuff. That Steve Ditko created Spider-Man. I've seen some proto SJWs want to discredit Stan Lee from anything. He had no creative impact whatsoever. I've seen Marvel fans say that. Marvel fanboys who didn't read these things, they weren't born yet when these issues came out, saying, it was Kirby who did all of this. And Kirby who gave us the New Gods, who gave us the Eternals. He obviously had the huge amount of imagination necessary. He was probably exercising it then too. Okay, maybe he was. I myself think, as I said, that Stan Lee wrote every page of these comics. And the reason I say that is not only because of the bad ideas. The bad ideas are all throughout here. And it's not just new bad ideas either. It's not just that. I mean, Nega Man and the Creature from the Black Lagoon and the Overmind are new ideas, and they were duds. They didn't work. No one cared about them at all. It wasn't just that Stan Lee wrote new ideas poorly for these issues. He also wrote some of his own great older ideas poorly in these issues. Most especially, it still grieves me. Most especially, what some would argue is his most famous creation, Galactus, returns for a three-issue run in this collection, and it's the worst Galactus appearance that I know of. He's preceded by a herald called Gabriel, an angel-type being that walks on air, but it turns out to be a robot. Why that would be true when Galactus can transform individual living beings into heralds of his. And first of all, let's go over. I mentioned that John Buscema is usually very bad at cover art. That is a cover of the Fantastic Four. Galactus Unleashed. I guess the font size here prevented the writer of the cover copy from writing the truth, which is Galactus Unleashed at Coney Island. Because for some reason, Galactus fights the Fantastic Four at Coney Island and tears up a whole bunch of rides that I've been on. Is that supposed to be world-threatening? What is happening here? Is Reed Richards fleeing? And why is Sue Richards bigger than he is? Why is she a gigantic man? Why is she anatomically gigantic? And why is only part of the Human Torch being affected by Galactus's hand beam? His boots are clear now, but his flame hasn't been totally erased. And why is Galactus grabbing the Silver Surfer there? It's just awful. And it goes on. I mean, in this issue, the Fantastic Four fights Galactus at Coney Island. Why? Why? So that we're presented with the image of Galactus tearing apart the roller coaster. Why? Why would any of this happen? Why is Galactus having so much trouble duking it out with these three paltry humans? And then we get the next issue. This is John Buscema's cover. Oh no, this might be Sal Buscema. Michael would probably know. I think that's Sal Buscema. Doesn't matter. It's still just as bad. It's just terrible. Absolutely terrible. This issue, I remember buying this. You see, it's gone all the way up to 20 cents. I remember buying this on the newsstand, and I thought it was just dreadful. I knew already by this issue that this was an embarrassment of a Galactus appearance. Galactus appearances are supposed to be huge. They're supposed to be just about as big as Marvel storylines get. This was ridiculous. Just paltry and ridiculous. But I do remember it having one really interesting moment. See, here's Galactus throwing a train. What on earth? But I do remember it having one really interesting moment. Yes, there's a moment where there's a subplot that runs throughout a lot of these issues is a great disillusionment on the part of the public with the Fantastic Four. They are arrested. Reed Richards has to write out a $20,000 check to get them out on bail. Their landlord kicks them out, evicts them from the Baxter Building. The public considers them to be dangerous costume freaks. And when you look at some of these issues and see how much gratuitous property damage they do, you easily understand that. During the epic fight between the Thing and the Hulk, at one point they obviously end up on the top of a building and fall. They get knocked off the top of that building. And as they're falling, the Thing realizes that he will probably die as a result of a fall from that height. The Hulk won't, but the fall might kill him. So he reaches out his hand and rakes to break himself. He reaches out his hand and drags a furrow right down the side of the building, right through people's living rooms. They can't live there anymore. The building wouldn't be sound anymore. As easily as much property damage is done, not just to Coney Island, but to all the rest of New York, easily as much damage is done in these issues as is done in the original Avengers movie by the Chitauri, the bad guys. But there is one sequence here where the army is fighting the Thing. There you've got just an ordinary grunt, and he has the old style wood stock rifle that the army weapons don't have wood in them anymore, but at this point they did, and it's not affecting the Thing at all. Why this guy would be firing wildly at the Thing with his own comrades right there, where either his shots or the ricochets could easily kill them, I don't know. And why the Thing would bite his rifle, I don't know. But I thought that was interesting. I thought, okay, so the Thing is invulnerable to conventional weapons fire. Then the army levels up to a bazooka. It blasts the Thing, but he's not seriously hurt. He's not wounded at all. He's still able to cause a street tremor. And what's going to come next is tank fire. But it doesn't happen. You can see some fantastic Buscema artwork here. The panel work is just amazing all throughout here. Look at that. Look at the vibrancy there of that one panel where the Thing pounding the ground causes that to happen. Of course, Stan Lee was never clear on the fact that would happen to the Thing as well. It wouldn't just in one direction. He can't direct a seismic impulse like that. But this panel here, full-powered tanks at point-blank range, we never get to see that. We never get to see what that would do to the Thing. Instead, we get Agatha Darkness just showing up to save the day. And the point that I wanted to make, I'm not just bashing on Stan Lee. Yes, he has terrible new ideas in this book, and he does the worst possible job at one of his greatest old ideas. This is the worst Galactus appearance of them all. But there are wonderful moments all throughout here. There are wonderful little human moments between the characters. Even the interactions between Dr. Doom and Susan Richards are wonderful. That surefire, that's the one thing where Stan Lee never let you down. His action sequences could be ridiculous. His plot contrivances could be ridiculous. The mechanisms by which he got characters on and off stage, like, for instance, in this famous issue, where Reed Richards realizes that his experiment has gone awry with the Thing, and he needs expert help in order to figure out how to reverse the damages. Who does he call? Bruce Banner. He calls Bruce Banner with a flare gun up in the air. Says, Bruce Banner, please come to the Baxter Building. Bruce Banner is the Hulk. And Reed Richards knows that. And he says in one classic line, he says, well, I'll just have to hope that he doesn't get too excited. And the Thing at the point that he's saying, the Thing is on a rampage in New York City. The cab driver, Bruce Banner, says, please take me to the Baxter Building and please don't upset me. The cab driver says, you want a calm ride from a New York hack? Dream on. And he drives him right by the Thing rampaging in Central Park. Naturally, Bruce Banner gets excited and turns into the Hulk. Which I think would be the first thing that Reed Richards would think. I don't think he would think, well, my friend's life is on the line. I'd better call in expert help. Who have I got on my Rolodex? Bruce Banner. Probably be the right thing here. What could go wrong? There are little details like that, but there are wonderful human moments all throughout here. Even Agatha Harkness, at one point, has a wonderful little pause of a moment where she's looking out a window at Reed Richards and Sue Richards and baby Franklin just enjoying themselves on the lawn of her property. And she says, it's been far too long since we heard carefree laughter here. To her cat. She tells her cat that. Little moments like that were always the moments that were revelations to me when I read a Stan Lee comic. I am perfectly willing to admit no moments like those had ever occurred in superhero comics before. It had never occurred to me that I would even want them. They never occurred in DC Comics. But in Marvel Comics, they were regular. And they got... I would argue that Stan Lee got better at them as he went along. So that scattered throughout this collection of absurdities that have great art. This is an absurd volume that has great artwork. Just look at when Buscema. I mean, look at the way he can do action. It's just incredible. The certainty with which he shifts perspectives, panel real estate. It's just amazingly good. Just amazingly good. And all throughout that beautifully illustrated absurdities here are wonderful little moments that Stan Lee gives us. So, it's called Battle of the Behemoths. That applies to the Thing versus the Hulk, which the Hulk wins in a TKO. This is not one of those ambiguous Marvel endings. The Hulk just trounces the Thing. It's not only that. Another Battle of the Behemoths is with the Overmind. However done it is, it's still done on an epic scale. And there's also a great issue in here. One of the issues that Stan Lee does really well. And that leads me to think that he actually wrote these issues because it deals with the Black Panther or in this issue, as he styles himself, the Black Leopard, and issues of race, issues of racism. Done wonderfully. That issue is done wonderfully, and in a way that I don't think Roy Thomas would have done. He might have done something similar, but not as well. Not as well at all as Stan Lee did. And there are a number of things like that throughout here. Also, Ben Grimm's humor in here is wonderfully, wonderfully done. There's a moment that is just terrific where the fight with the Hulk and having the tar beaten out of him by the Hulk seems to cure him of his madness that was induced by this device that Reed Richards created to cure him. He seems to be himself again, and Reed Richards says, well, we can work on this device and maybe fix the side effects. And Ben Grimm looks at the device and then destroys it. This is not worth it. And the reason it's not worth it is because, look at that, it's because he's already the idol of millions. He already has a wonderful woman that loves him. That's pure Stan Lee. And those kinds of moments just work all throughout here. So, very happy with this pick. I have no idea what Michael's picking next time. Sometimes he gives me furtive hints. But I don't know. If he's done it, I have ignored it. I don't know what we're doing next time. But he's 2 for 2 now of collections that Steve likes. That can't last. There's bound to be a dud that he picks sometime along the line. But we shall see. This has gone over long, as always. I love these issues. Absolutely love them. So I could talk about them forever. And I'm glad that I have an epic collection that I can manhandle, because I can't manhandle these issues anymore. They're just too weak. They weren't meant to be read 100 times. And I've read them 100 times. But whatever mischief Michael gets us into, we will reconvene next week. And we'll see what we encounter on Epic Wednesday. So I will wrap this up for now at last. I will see you then. Thank you, BookTube.